Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade, and I am here with an unusual video. I seem to like to do unusual videos. Anyway, this is going to be kind of an after-action report style video of one of my more favorite games, which is Europa Universalis 4. However, there's something that's not quite normal about this particular after-action report. I did not play this game. This is actually an after-action report of a Paradox event known as the Grandest LAN party, where a large group of people got together in a castle in Poland, in Silesia, Poland, as a matter of fact, and they played for 4 days straight Hearts of Iron 4. And this has been a very enjoyable event to watch. The casters have been a lot of fun. We got to see some casting from the French Paradox, from Emperor Cirque, from our Rod, from the bus. We even saw CK Nor and Blondie hop in there every now and then, and of course DDR Jake and Groogy. I think this has been a good event in that we got to basically train some alternate casters, if you will. It was good to see, especially Emperor Cirque and the French Paradox. Both of these guys grew on me a lot through the course of this event, especially Emperor Cirque, who in the past I've seen him in dev clashes, and he hasn't always been one of my favorite devs, but I have let's say he's gained a new fan from the casting that he's done here at this event. I thought he was quite enjoyable and fun to watch. So with that being said, I think that's a good thing for the future of EU4, the future of casting it, and the future of having casters. You know, in the past we've had, you know, Jake have to go away, or, you know, Jake and Chris having to go away, and we end up getting stuck with like a B squad who doesn't really know what they're doing, and the whole experience, at least for one particular day or course of the dev clash, kind of gets a little bit of a kink put in it because, well, we've got new casters learning on the job. This event has given us several guys that can fill the shoes, though I think we're obviously going to see the French Paradox quite often playing in the upcoming dev clashes, as well as Emperor Cirque. But if they were not, I think they'd be able to fill in marvelously for Chris and or Jake and or Groogy or whoever's casting at that period in time. So with that being said and out of the way, I actually want to start talking about the gameplay itself. On the first day, we saw a game that unfolded kind of naturally in how you would expect Europa Universalis 4 game to play out. People died, people were in the way, and others grew, and it was very natural. There wasn't a lot of hug boxing going on quite yet, and I thought that the first day of the event was quite fun to watch from a gameplay perspective. Through the course of the event, we got to see a lot of extracurricular activities. We got to see some videos made by the casters of some of the things going on behind the scenes at the castle, from archery events to sword fighting classes to all kinds of cool things. We even got to see some duels with swords. So there was a lot more to this EU4 experience than what we normally see in a dev clash. With that being said, leading into day 2, the world started to ally up, which is natural in Hearts of Iron 4. The world does tend to ally up. However, in day 2, we also started to see, well, some of the worst, if you will. It was where Poland started to, let's say, the opposite of shine. Poland is one of the 3 countries that I would like to, I don't know, shame in this video. Poland was despicable. He was despicable last year, and he was despicable this year. And he seems to wear his backstabby nature, his untrustworthy nature, with a badge of honor, like it's a good thing. But honestly, he created an atmosphere in Europe that set Europe behind from the next couple of days to come. Europe could have been a lot farther ahead of things if Poland hadn't been Poland. Of all players in the game, Poland is the person I would have most liked to have seen completely get wrecked and eliminated from the game. He truly was the worst of the worst. With that being said, there's 3 Ps of this game. The 3 Ps of this game, Poland, Prussia, and Persia, all need to be talked about. And I've just talked about Poland. Prussia, he was kind of, well, the actual leader of the Central Germanics, even though the Palatinate was, from a game point of view, the leader, being the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Prussia was really calling the shots, and I believe he did so in a very poor way, in a very dishonorable way, and he did not help himself nor his alliance on the world stage. If anything, he helped Saxony and the Palatinate to develop a bad name, when really Prussia, I think, was most at fault for the creation of their black eye. With that being said, it's time to move on to Persia. Persia, the self-proclaimed hero of this Grandest LAN party, was at first seemed like a fairly decent chap until he got on his high horse. His high horse, for lack of, he had understandable reasons to start with his crusade against hug boxes, but when it was all said and done, he was the worst offender of hugboxism that this game has seen. Persia, in his attempts to break up the Indian Thunderdome that was never a Thunderdome, we had 3 Indian countries who rapidly grew and grew very strong: the Moguls, Mewar, and Orissa. They looked very scary. And Persia decided that he would take it upon himself to organize the coalition of the entire world against these 3 people. And what he did was take a situation that would have naturally degraded over time. Orissa, Moguls, and Mewar, one of them would have eventually broke. One of them would eventually turn on each other. The Indian Thunderdome eventually turns on each other. We have seen this over and over and over again, and it was only a matter of time until the Mughals would be turned upon. But Persia seemed to want to speed up the process, and in doing so he rallied a coalition of the entire world versus 3, and created the biggest hug box the world had ever seen, and set the precedent for what would happen for the rest of the Dev Clash, and that would be everyone and their mother jumping on a few people. Every war would turn into 12 to 16 versus 1 or 2. And this I place squarely on the back of Persia. I believe Persia is as shameful as Poland, and I would have loved to have seen Persia burn, and burn to the ground during the course of this game. If he would have left well enough alone, things would have naturally deteriorated, but he couldn't help himself. With that being said, there's other countries I would like to talk about. So I've talked about the worst countries, the 3 Ps. Now let's talk about the best countries. Miwar. Miwar was a very enjoyable country to watch. Every time he would come to the booth and would talk about how things were going, he would be straight and to the point, honest, and he was very relatable. And when he would fight, he would always be the first one in or last one out, as Jake pointed out during the course of the fighting. He played a very honorable game. He played a game willing to take his troops and back up his mouth and do the good fight. I believe Miwar earned the MVP of this entire event, and I salute you, Miwar. Then there's also Italy and France. Italy and France were the quote-unquote influencers. That's because they had amongst their teams Arumba and Flurryworry, who are some fairly well-known streamers. That being said, I think, at least to an extent, the other people behind the scenes played an equally important role. I felt like at times when people were watching the event that the streamers would get most of the credit for the success of their countries. But I would like to point out that at least during one point of this episode, we saw Italy in a very important war, and we saw Flurryworry, part of the Italian team, on camera pretty much, well, quite inebriated. So it was obvious that Flurryworry was not the person on the keyboard controlling the destiny of a very important war that was relative to France at the time. So that it's to be said, and I'm pointing this out because I would like to give due props to the other players, not just Arumba and Flurryworry. With that being said, I did find the Flurryworry's interesting situation to be enjoyable. It's human. People go to events like these, they relax, they have a drink or two, and things happen. And in this instance, Flurryworry, he couldn't find his panda ears, and he was a bit sad about that. He made an agreement with 004, who was calling him out on it, and he got caught on camera a little inebriated. You know what, Flurryworry? You gained a subscriber by what I saw. You seem to be down to earth, human, and fun to watch. So I salute you, and I salute all of Italy, and I salute all of France. Both of you guys, you two teams played a very solid game. You were very loyal to each other. You almost had to be because of the way the German bloc kind of forced the entirety of Europe to band together because they were being such bullies. But Italy and France oftentimes would stand up against the hug boxes. We saw Italy and France come to the aid of several countries who were on the short ends of the stick, and that was nice to see. Other countries I'd like to talk about are the Moguls. So the Moguls, they they started off the game with kind of a diplomacy through passive-aggressive bullying. They dictated that there must be peace. They didn't war that much, though they did do whatever they could to get in the way of Qing. And, well, it wasn't that Qing didn't call it upon himself. Qing is another country I would like to talk about, and I think these two will be a good way to talk about both countries simultaneous. Qing, he started the game early on. One of the team, the Russian member, who wore a very interesting costume and behaved rather very fun in a role-play-like manner, got on stream and said that he was going to burn the world, and that well, Qing wasn't Qing at the time, but they were the Horde version prior to forming Qing at that point in time. And he very valiantly got on stream and basically said that they were going to destroy everyone. And that's a very ballsy thing to say in a multiplayer match where you're facing a lot of other people and a lot of other very powerful countries. And you got to give the guy respect for it. But what you don't have to give respect to is the immediate coalition of 6+ countries that formed, with the Moguls leading the list as the largest country of the group, rallying together what would be known as the Asian Hug Box. The Moguls almost seemed to create what you would see in game as being an air of absolute peace by gunpoint. And they were definitely the bullies on the block. Bullies that would, in time, end up getting their comeuppance. Had Persia not interfered, Asia would have eventually turned on the Mughals. But Persia did not allow time for that to happen naturally. Then let's talk about Ruthenia. Ruthenia, who started off enjoyable to watch as Georgia, turned into Ruthenia, which they were still enjoyable to watch at that time period, right up until the point that they decided they needed to protect Poland. What were you thinking? Why did you feel the need to protect the most despicable nation on the face of the planet? After that, it made me start to question much of your motivation, and while I at first thought you guys were a pretty decent group, as soon as you started harboring the Polish, you quickly went downhill in my eyes. And that's what I will say about Ruthenia. I've talked about Palatinate and Saxony. They were part of the German bloc who kind of got a bad eye because of things that Prussia had done. Scandinavia was very loyal also to the German group. However, I think they seemed to avoid the black eye because, well, they were far enough north to not, while they would always be part of that power block, they were able to distance themselves from, I think, most of the bad relations of it. They played a very good game. They did a lot of colonization, and I think Scandinavia did a good job with what they were given. Mali, well, Mali played Mali. Mali starts off in Africa. Africa's kind of behind the curve. It's hard to get competitive in multiplayer amongst so many people when you're playing an African nation. But Mali tried to be relevant, and I think they did a fairly decent job. Japan was part of that early Asian hug box, but Japan was probably one of the first ones to start to go in ways that mattered to Japan. Japan started to propagate its power abroad, even taking it to Great Britain at one point. I thought Japan's play was very enjoyable and entertaining, and and I appreciated Japan's play through the course of this play. I think they did a good job taking naval ideas. Maybe they didn't build as many ships as they should have to go along with those naval ideas, but all in all, Japan was entertaining. I think the most entertaining of the countries that were relevant was Spain. Spain, you guys, at times, you really made this Grandest LAN party enjoyable to watch. If it wasn't because we were always constantly asking ourselves, what is Spain going to do? You guys did some of the most brilliant tactical maneuvers I've seen on the battlefield, and you also did some of the worst. And it constantly had me scratching my head. What is Spain going to do next time? But all in all, your brilliance and lack thereof, it seemed to average out. And so I would say your play was as good as anybody else's. Even though at times Emperor Cirque was hollering at the stream against you guys, I think he came down a little hard on you, as I think a lot of your brilliant tactical maneuvers that you did, well, they could have outweighed some of your odd neglect to enter some battles. But all in all, you made the stream enjoyable, and I thank you for that, guys. Good job, Spain. Next people to talk about, how about the Mamelukes? So, the Mamelukes do what the Mamelukes do. They raided Kos, they united as much of northern Africa as they could, they jumped in on wars, but maybe they jumped in on too many wars. They were always a consummate offender of, we're going to be part of the war against the few. In every giant war, you could find the Mamelukes taking part. But all in all, they were a fairly relevant country that I don't have too many bad things to say about, other than the fact that they always seem to be jumping on board the big wars against the few people. Malaya. Malaya did some shrewd moves to become Malaya. Was maybe the first person to kill someone in Asia. Evidently, he got the approval of the Moguls in order to do so. Malaya was relevant through the course of the game. They didn't do anything too bad. They did slay a player, but you know, players need to be slayed, especially if you're trying to form, you know, your empire of Malaya. That's to be understood. Through the course of the game, they did often end up in the giant hug box. They did usually end up being called up by Persia for the, you know, the false flag operations of, oh, we must stop the hug box, and in order to stop the hug box, we will become the greatest hug box. And so Malaya was another person like the Mamelukes that was always there, called up to fight the few. Nepal often ended up on the short end of the stick from Prussia, you know, Nepal being one of the big three, maybe the most trustworthy of the big three. Mewar was obviously a bit more aggressive than the other big three, though he seemed very loyal to Nepal. I think Nepal was the least aggressive of the big three, and I also felt that Nepal seemed very loyal to Mewar. I think it would have eventually been Nepal and Mewar bringing the comeuppance to the Mughals, as, well, it should have been, if Persia wouldn't have kept intervening and basically putting Nepal into the focal light of being a bad guy. and in the course of the game, Nepal was never a bad guy. If there was a good guy in the game, Nepal could have been like the textbook example of probably the good guy of the game. He played a very honorable, nice, friendly game, even though he was pretty much constantly in first place. He didn't do so through bullying. Hormuz played a pretty silent game. They were early allies of Persia, and so they were expected to be in any war that Persia would be in, being that they were so close to Persia from the start. So I don't fault them for being in so many of the, oh my god, let's everyone declare war on one person in the world. So Hormuz would usually be there with Persia because they were natural allies from the beginning. Then there's Rum, the PDX team. We'll save the last for, you know, I don't know most of these players that have played in the other games, but I've seen enough out of Trin, Tragula, and Arheo to know something about their playstyles. Of course, there is a third individual that we never met, and so we don't know what his playstyle is, but it seemed like Trin, Tragula kind of controlled Rum, as far as I'm concerned. Arheo tends to be much more aggressive than Trin, and Trin tends to be much more cautious than Arheo. And in this game, we saw a Rum that was played very well. I mean, there's no doubt Rum played a good game, but it was also a very cautious game. It was classic Trin Tragula at the helm, as far as I'm concerned. And I think maybe Arheo should have pushed a little more aggressiveness out of Trin, because Rum could have certainly played a little more aggressively. But what I most of all would have liked to have seen Rum do more than what they did is they kept being called in by Persia to bully the world. And if there was any country that I think should have truce braked or said, no, we're not gonna play your fiddle game here, we're not gonna be your puppet, we're not gonna continue to smash some poor fool and be amongst the 12 others that are declaring war on, you know, the unfortunate 2 or 3. If anyone should have started to try to put a stop to it, I think you guys, Rum, having been the most veteran players here. Yes, everyone playing is obviously good at Europa Universalis 4, but you guys have played so many dev clashes, and you've been in the multiplayer environment probably so much more than all the rest of them. I think you guys could have helped lead by example on how to not form these massive hug boxes that plagued this event. With that being said, I've gone over and I've discussed pretty much every relevant nation. There were some other nations that were interesting, like the Swiss and their chocolate, or Australia. But, you know, there's other reasons to talk about them, not because of really their relevance of the game, but the fun that they brought to it, and that's because, you know, they were played by the casters. I likely would have liked to have seen the casters try to be a little more relevant in the game. It seemed from the outset of the game you guys were very content to play a Grugi style game, and with Grugi being part of the team, I understand that he had an influence. But having DDR Jake and the French Paradox also on the team, I would have expected, you know, maybe a little bit more world conquest, a little bit more attempts at, you know, putting a little better, being more relevant than what you were. though Grugi did sell half of your country, and, well, it's kind of hard to stay relevant when you have the Grugi selling your land off. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen maybe more effort put in by the casters. But all in all, I enjoyed, watching you guys immensely. And lastly, I would like to give a big shout out for the group, the real organizers of this event. So Paradox really is only taking responsibility, from what I understand, for the streaming of the event, and it was a completely different group that organized and really sponsored this event. They're not, they have good relations with Paradox, obviously, but it's really this organization that does like roleplay events and represent the castle in which the event is taking part in, that we have to thank for this entertainment we got to watch. And I think they need a shout out for, wow, a castle, wow, all this, the events and things, the amazing monks, the role play, this atmosphere that you created for this event to happen in is just incredible, and you need, I want to put that thanks out there from me, a guy on the end of the consumer line who is not at the event but is watching the stream from, somewhere in the U.S. I'm the end of the line, and what you did there still had an effect on me, because I got to watch some quality entertainment. I thank you guys for putting on that event, and I thank Paradox for casting it. And all in all, I think it was a very fun event to watch. So any of my subscribers, anybody who's watching this video and has no idea what I'm talking about, you haven't seen the Grandest LAN, go to Paradox Interactive, to their Twitch channel, and click on the videos tab, and you will find several, many hours. One of the videos is actually over 8 hours long. So there's 4 days of Hearts of Iron 4 being streamed, with a lot of stuff to watch. And if you haven't seen any of it, but you love Europa, you love EU4, you love watching the dev clashes, check this out. You never heard of EU4? Check this out. Maybe it's a game you like. But all in all, this is what I'm rambling on about. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like. And as always, anyone who watches my videos, I hope you appreciate them. You guys are awesome, and peace.